back with another Colorado spring football analysis video. Brian, we've had practices 8 and 9 Monday and Wednesday. We had a chance to talk to 4 of the defensive assistants and do some player interviews. First off, let's start with those coaches we talked to on defense, starting with Rod Chance. Has a young group to work with there. Doesn't want to talk about the guys that left, which makes a lot of sense. You got to focus on the guys that are here that are going to be making plays for the Buffs this year.
Yeah, and that's a group that we keep hearing about. You know, people are excited about those young corners, and we saw it on Saturday a little bit. Those guys making plays, and it sounds like there's a chip on the shoulder of those guys to prove that, hey, even without Christian and Mekhi, we're actually pretty good. So I kind of like the approach, and Rod Chance seems like kind of a no nonsense type of guy that he's kind of ready to prove to people I can coach these guys up.
Joshua Wiggins turned some heads on Saturday, but Rod Chance was quick to point out that Jalen Oliver, who also came in as an early enrollee, is going to be a player for them. And if they keep recruiting kind of those mid-level 3-star guys at other positions like they have at cornerback the last couple of years, this program is going to be okay. They've done a good job kind of finding the under-the-radar talent at that position. Yeah,
they've done that back to McIntyre. It's been amazing the type of talent they've gotten at corner that's been sort of underrated, but it seems like they've got that type of group. And I was going to say McIntyre. Darrell has mentioned that he feels like this is sort of the same type of group as what just left, is that they're that talented. So it's going to be interesting. I'm excited about that young group. There's a lot to prove, but you look at the talent. We've seen it from Nico Reed and Kalen Moore a little bit. We saw a little bit of Josh Wiggins the other day. So and Nigel Bethel's a guy that I thought played really well before he got hurt last year.
Is there a more cool, calm, and collected coach than BrettMaxwell out there? He kind of comes over there with his shades, even though it's pretty much dark out, and he speaks very softly, but a man that's got a lot of experience coaching football.
Yeah, he really does, and I think he's a guy that is a calming force for that group. And you're right. I mean, cool, calm, and collected. I mean, and he's a good talker too, good storyteller. I like listening to him, and but he's one that he's got his work cut out for him with that group, because there is not a lot of depth there right now. And he mentioned it that, hey, we're kind of hurting right now as far as the depth, and so he's got his work cut out for him.
Trevor Woods is a guy to be excited about there. He talked about the improvement that he showed in man-to-man coverage. That was the one area, if you looked at Trevor Woods' game, he's going to make plays out there.
Yeah.
It was, is he going to be consistent covering guys? We'll see it out on the field this fall and then really make a determination there, but at least Maxey said that's something that he's improved on.
Yeah, for sure. I think Woods is a guy that everybody's kind of expecting to make that jump. And, as you pointed out, there's going to be some, mistakes that are made for young players. We see that all the time. So he's probably not going to be a perfect Trevor Woods this year, but I think a lot of people are expecting him to make that jump. We're hearing that from BrettMaxwell that he's starting to do that. And, Tyron Taylor's kind of the same way, playing a little nickel as well, but they need those guys to step up. And right now, Isaiah Lewis is limited, so they need him to step up as well. But, when we're hearing about, some lower level guys right now, I mean, one of the guys that BrettMaxwell pointed out, Jordan Wolverton, former quarterback, making some plays. And so, but we'll see. We've seen it before, but it'd be great. I mean, the Buffs needed that spot, particularly some of these guys that have been in other spots, to step up.
Speaking of coaches with great personalities, we talked to inside linebackers coach Mark Smith as well. That's a guy that I'd love to go play football for. I just like his personality and the way he communicates. He's got a group that looks awfully thin when you consider the fact that on Saturday there were 3 inside linebackers out on the field quite a bit of the time.
Yeah, and they're doing a lot of 4-3 this year. And you try to find a 2 deep, it's like, well, it's everybody that they've got is in the 2 deep because there's nobody else left. So, they're thin at that spot as well. And he mentioned that they're hurting. And I mean, they brought Owen Carey, who was signed as an outside linebacker. He's playing inside right now, and it sounds like he's doing really well. But they've got to get some reinforcements there. I imagine they'll shift it up and go some 3-4 as well, to where they don't have to rely on those guys so much. But they've got to get some of those guys to step up, and they need more depth there.
Mr. Williams is back, which helps them with their depth there. And Carl Durrell pointed out Marvin Ham today. Again, these are things that you take their word for it right now because you don't have a choice to. We can't really see a whole lot with our own eyes, and I want to see in the fall. But those are the names of the guys that you want to hear that are getting better because they're going to need them.
Yeah, and to me, I think it's different from when, if I ask a question about Marvin Ham, you're going to get the answer. But when Carl Dwell brings up Marvin Ham without even being asked about it and says he's playing his best football since I've been here, that says a lot. I mean, I think that can tell the fans something about he's taking a step up. I mean, Marvin Ham's been on the cusp of being on the field for this team. Hasn't been quite there because there's been some older players there, but if he's playing his best football right now and takes that up another level in the fall, that's the guy that can actually help this team.
And for the first time, we got a chance to talk to Gerald Chapman, the new defensive line coach. He addressed the elephant in the room pretty early on, the fact that the guys that he inherited, I mean, he's their third position coach in about a span of 4 months there. And maybe that's a little bit dramatic because Chris Wilson is still around, and the fact that Vic So'oto didn't actually coach any practices here. But that's a group that was kind of put through the ringer a little bit following last season.
Yeah, and I had a chance to actually chat with him at the Blake Street Tavern event last month. And so that was my second time talking to him. But same message for him. I mean, he mentioned back then, too, that was his point, was he wanted to just make sure these guys got to know him as a coach and he got to know them as players. He did tell me back then, he didn't get into it the other day, but a cool story he told me was that he used to coach the Bengals, and he coached Josh Tupou there, who obviously we know is a former Buff. And he very quickly got Josh Tupou on a Zoom call with the defensive lineman here, and he said that was a big deal. Like, these guys could see, whoa, here's a guy that just played in the Super Bowl for the Bengals, and my new coach now knows him and coached him, and he was a Buff. And so he said that was kind of a cool thing, that he had that connection, that they could kind of bond through that a little bit. And so he's doing some good things, I think, off the field to kind of smooth things over with that group. And I think they like him from what I've heard, and it sounds like he's doing a pretty good job coaching as well.
And then today, like I mentioned, we did player interviews. I know you talked to Dion Smith, a guy that's had a great opportunity to get a lot of reps this spring. What did he have to say to you?
Yeah, I mean, that group is sort of like the corners, where you lose the top two corners and they got a chip on their shoulder. That running back group is the same way. You lose Jarek Broussard, and there's a lot of people looking at that group and saying, well, they lost their top running back. And Dion's like, well, hey, we just haven't had that shot. We're still pretty good. And he's one of those guys that said, I asked him, I said, do you kind of feel that way? And he said, 100,000%. That's the highest percentage I've ever heard. So that's pretty good. He's motivated, and he's big. I mean, he's bigger than I thought he was. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but he's a big back, and he flashed a little bit last year. I think that group, I mean, they need some. They got to stay healthy because there's not a lot of depth there right now, especially. But between Alex Fontenot, Dion Smith, Jaley Stacks, who's a guy we keep hearing about, that group's going to be, I think, fun to watch. And Dion's whole message to me basically was, we just haven't really had a chance to prove it, and we're pretty good.
I had a chance to talk to a young tight end, Austin Smith, and he's got one of the better stories on this team. He comes from a town of 30 people, grew up on a farm close to the Gulf of Mexico, and he was completely under the radar of every college. And he went out to a camp and got a few offers, but it was like the Northern Colorados of the world, and he wanted to go a little bit bigger than that. So he was actually committed to go to a JUCO until Andy Wang here at CU found out about him, and they saw some tape of him. At his high school, they didn't use a tight end. They didn't want him getting beat up because they needed him. They said, Austin, if you get hurt, then we don't have anything left. So we're not gonna put you in harm's way.
Right.
He quit playing basketball because he put 40 points on the board, and they triple teamed him the next game. Just a real small area in Texas. And so he said he just comes in here every day and he's living the dream, and he's backing it up. He's going to be a valuable member of this team. It might not necessarily be this year. It might be kind of like we were talking about with Caleb Fourier and some of the young tight ends a year ago. It might not be a year from now, but Coach Patterson, the tight ends coach, has mentioned that he brings a different dynamic to that tight ends group with the speed that he brings there. Yeah,
I'm excited about him as well, and I agree with you. He's probably maybe a 2023 type of guy. With that group, I'm more excited to see. We talked about Caleb Fourier and Eric Olson last year. That's probably their turn this year. But with Brady Russell graduating, Austin Smith is a guy. You look at that talent and just the physical tools. And I saw him. As you were talking to him, like, that's a big dude. Yeah. I mean, the tight end room is way bigger than I've remembered around here in a long time. I mean, big, physical, and athletic, more so than we've seen in a long time. And so those guys look the part right now, and Austin Smith certainly did.
I went for the good spring stories. I also talked to Anthony Lyle, a walk-on. He walked on at Eastern Michigan, made the team there, like old school tryouts, not the preferred walk-on stuff. And then he missed Colorado, so he transferred back here, and he had to go through that process again. I mean, not quite to the extent of Rudy, but like he had to legitimately show up to an open tryout, made the team, was one of their better special teams guys last year, and on Saturday, he's out there with the first team group because Isaiah Lewis was out. Now, they're going to bring in some guys at safety. Anthony Lyle's probably not going to start here this fall, but he's a guy that has a place on this team now as a walk-on.
Yeah, I think so. And if you get some injuries at safety, then maybe he's a guy that plays a little bit back there. I'll be interested to see they got 3 safeties coming in the summer. What does that group look like? And, Anthony's got the talent, like you said, that he can push his way in there, especially with a lot of these guys being, freshmen. Could he, make his move there? And, so he's a cool story. You're right. I mean, you look at what he does on special teams, like he's got to be able to do something on defense too, right?
Yeah, and he's got 6 siblings, so there's a lot of Lyles out there on Folsom Field on Saturday. You might run into one of them this fall. You also had a chance to talk to Jake Wiley, who we've talked quite a bit about this spring in terms of a guy that has done everything they needed him to coming off a disappointing season. Yeah,
and he mentioned that too, that, hey, he knows it was a disappointing season, but he's thrown into a guy. He hadn't really played any college snaps. He's thrown into a spot that is arguably one of the toughest spots on a football field. That, hey, go play left tackle and protect our freshman quarterback, will you? That's a tough spot. He learned a lot from that. I think Coach Devan's been big for him. He mentioned playing next to Tommy Brown's been big too. He obviously played next to Kari Kutch, who's very good last year, and he said it's been fun playing with somebody different. Because Tommy Brown's a little more outgoing than Kari Kutch was, but he learned a lot from Kari. He's learning a lot from Tommy, and just that different personality. And he said it's been a lot of fun. He learned a lot from going back and kind of rewatching the film last year. Feels like he's in a much better spot than he was a year ago.
All right, we've raced past the midway point of spring ball. We're going to be back to share some more of our thoughts on Saturday.